Chelsea fam, welcome back to Couch Critic. I apologize for the little bit of a hiatus there. I had work to do, couldn't get out of it. But I am glad to be back and just in time for the transfer window. That's right, the transfer window is open. And in this edition of Couch Critic, what we're going to be doing is looking at the players that Chelsea have been linked to in defense, in the midfield, and in offense, in the striking positions, and comparing and contrasting their styles of play statistically with that of Thomas Tuchel's setup. But without further ado, you know what to do. Let's get into it.
And blue is the colour. Essien! Drogba! Lampard! That could be the championship!
Greetings! Welcome back to Couch Critic with me, Dennis P, for what is a special edition of Couch Critic where we look at the transfer window. That's right, we're going to be spending the next 3 videos looking at the transfer window and players that Chelsea have been linked to. We're going to start with the defense, then the next day we're going to look at the midfield, and then the day after that we're going to be looking at the striking options and comparing and contrasting their styles, figuring out what is the best fit for Chelsea statistically specifically, and also, what is the best fit like going forward for the club. But before I get into all that, you guys already know I got a sponsor for the show. They go by the name of Major League Socks. And fellas, if you ever want to walk in the footsteps of greatness, you know what to do. Just hit these fellas up. The link will be in the description. Okay, so much has changed since I've done my last video. Obviously, we have the Bowley Clear Lake Group coming in as owners. They've been approved by the Premier League and the government. So they are the new owners of Chelsea Football Club. Not a secret to anyone that has been following the story. But we've also had the sanctions lifted and are now active in the transfer window as of today. And also, we've lost a few players in the midst. The likes of Tony Rudiger, Christensen, and potentially the likes of Alonso and Azpilicueta. So clearly a lot of holes on the defense right now that need to be filled. So we're going to be spending the next 10 to 15 minutes looking at some of the targets, some of the players that have been linked with Chelsea, and figuring out if there's a suitability there, whether or not they fit with the mold of the club right now. Because I feel like the problems that we run into a lot of the time at Chelsea is we buy the most available players, the marquee signing, the big names, but we don't necessarily address the fit within the system. And so I'm going to be looking at a lot of the raw data. Again, I must admit, some of these players I have not watched with the eye test. We're just going to be analyzing the data and figuring out if they have what it takes to be a Thomas Tuchel defender. Now, before we go too far with this video, I think it's important to analyze what Thomas Tuchel wants in his defenders. And we can look no further than the player types that we've had on the pitch recently this year. Thiago Silva, obviously a man mountain in the back, a guy that very rarely makes mistakes due to his experience, not necessarily due to the fact that, he has a specific style of play, but his experience, his know-how, his ability to be at the right place at the right time is unquestioned and unrivaled. But he's also very good in possession, very composed on the ball, and can pick a pass without question. One of the better long-distance passers in the Chelsea side. And for that reason, he was relied upon heavily. And whenever we were pressed and whatnot, he was one of the guys that was used to help alleviate some of the stress of the press. He was always in possession of the football. If you look at the hard data, you can see he's right up there with the leaders in the Premier League in terms of touches and, of course, with progressive passes as well. So Thomas Tuchel needs a defender that is composed, good on the ball, and good in possession, very composed, as I said before, and can advance the ball, pick passes all over the pitch, make quick decisions as well. You saw Rudiger, who played somewhere in and around 34 games, obviously a mainstay in that back three as well, a guy that we're losing. And what are we going to be losing? Obviously his ability to progress the ball. You always every game without question, there's at least 2 or 3 attempts where Rudiger take it from the back of the defense and progress it all the way up the pitch, dribbling through and getting into the final third. And, mixed reviews about what he does when he gets there, but without question, his ability to progress the ball and get it forward is something that we will need in our new defenders, but also possess the ability to be counterattack resistant. I know that's not a term that's normally used when describing player types and whatnot, but I feel it's important when you think about how Chelsea play football. Obviously, we press way up the pitch. We have our defenders pressed way up the pitch to try and squeeze the area and produce turnovers and whatnot, or even just to put more pressure on the defense. And as a result, because our defenders are so high up the pitch, we are very much susceptible to counterattacks And we need somebody that is clearly pacey enough to recover and get back in position and break up any sort of particular counterattack. And Rudiger was brilliant at that last year. Obviously made the player of the team of the year this year, mainly due to the fact that he was so good at, one-on-one defensing and of course breaking up counterattacking threats and whatnot. You can say that that left side was completely marshaled by him. When you look at the likes of Alonso, who's definitely not as fleet of foot, but had the likes of Rudiger behind him to, clean up any of the mistakes that were left by him. And there were a lot. Let's just be honest there were a lot. So now we have to look at what we need, what types of players are being targeted by Chelsea and whether or not they possess the same sort of skill sets that we are losing. And I'm going to start with Jules Kounde, because I really do believe that this guy is almost a perfect fit for this club. He's obviously not the tallest guy in the world, but his leap is incredible. He can get up, he can definitely challenge, he wins a lot of aerial duels just with his aggression and his ability to get up. So that's not really in question. What the things that I'm really looking at that I really admire and value in our defenders right now is how are you in possession? And clearly at the age of 22, Jules Kounde is one of the better defenders in possession. He's a guy that is trusted by his teammates as an outlet to relieve, either a press or, to recycle possession and whatnot. And you don't receive the ball as much as he does if the teammates don't trust him that he's going to make the right decisions while under duress, under pressure and whatnot. And he's clearly showing that, in the defensive third, in the defensive mid and, the offensive mid areas. He's very good in possession and one that can be trusted on to take the ball and progress it as well. So, he's obviously good with the ball at his feet. He's obviously good at picking a pass, as the stats will show. And he's played in a team that obviously loves to have possession. And when you look at that Sevilla team, I think that they had the ball about 60% of the time and, were always on the front foot. They didn't really concede a lot of goals. I think they ranked first in terms of fewest goals conceded in La Liga, and that's basically down to the fact that they have a solid defense, but at the same time they have a lot of possession. And sometimes when you look at possession stats, they can be misleading, or defensive stats, they can be misleading because sometimes you have a team that plays a low block defense and doesn't, like a Burnley, for instance, that doesn't give up a lot of opportunities because they're just so compact and there's not a lot of space. But in respect to somebody like Sevilla or even Chelsea in that respect, you'll find that they are very much progressive teams that like to play in the final third and whatnot and keep the ball rotating over, keep recycling possession. And that in and in itself is a defensive tactic as well. If you don't give the ball away, you can't be scored upon, So, you feel like Jules Kounde can certainly be a guy that we can use on that right side that can help solidify that right side, keep us in possession of the football, and then also advance it into the dangerous areas to score goals. So with that in mind, I think that he's a perfect fit on that right side. Now, recently in the press with the news about Lukaku wanting to go back to Inter Milan, we've been linked with a lot of players from there, from the likes of, I think Dumfries was linked from there, the right back, the right wing back, also Bastioni, their young defender, and also Skriniar. And of the three that have been mentioned, it's Skriniar that makes the most sense to me in terms of who would fit what Chelsea are trying to do. Like this guy, again, 26 years old, a guy that receives a lot of passes and of course is very good in possession as well. His distribution is very good. All of these things, he's a very combative defender. He'd be likely a like-for-like replacement for Rudiger, but I think that he's actually even a better passer than Rudiger was as well. When you look at his passing stats, they're off the charts. This guy, completes like 90%, 95% of his short-range passes. I think his mid-range passes is somewhere in around 94%. And then his long-range passes are 87%. So, obviously it takes two people to complete a pass, but his eye for a pass and his ability to put it where the receiver wants it is, second to none in a lot of ways. 93% overall passing accuracy. And, this is the types of things that we need from Chelsea. Again, when you look at the possession numbers for Skriniar and Inter, obviously Inter and Italy in general aren't really a possession-based league. There's a lot of counter-attacking. There's a lot of, basically trying to posture and defend. But, with Inter having close to about 57% possession, they obviously like to be the team that is more progressive than their opponent. And with that in mind, Skriniar again as one of the defenders in that Inter setup is the guy that had a lot of touches. So again, that speaks to the fact that his teammates trust him. When he's in possession of the football, he rarely plays a foot wrong, and for that reason, they always look for him as a release or a guy that can get them playing football. So again, very good in possession, composed, combative, a guy that wins tackles, a guy that is very, very good in progressing the football, and very good in passing the ball. So these are all the things that I think that we would be looking at as a defender for Chelsea under Thomas Tuchel, because as I said before, we are a possession-based team. We have the possession of the ball maybe 60-70% of the time in the game. So the majority of the game, we're going to need people that are very good on the ball and very good in possession. And it looks like Skriniar, of the names that I've mentioned before, is one of the guys that like ticks all the boxes, and is pretty much should be the top of the list for Chelsea as far as defenders go. Now, if this were the end of the 2018-2019 season and we were linked with the likes of Matthijs de Ligt, I would have been delighted at the fact that he was being linked with Chelsea. Just because when I saw him that year, for Ajax, taking his team to the Champions League semifinals and very, very close to going to the final, you saw a defender that was such a boss, a young boss at 19 years old, commanding the respect of his teammates and, not really paying a foot wrong for the most part. Since his move to Juventus, obviously the price tag was high. The demand was obviously very high. Pressure was high and whatnot. A team that obviously wins a lot in Juventus. He's kind of like faltered a bit. He hasn't really held up to, the expectations. And I think that has a lot to do with the fact that, Chiellini seems to be ageless. And the role that you saw De Ligt in at Ajax is not really available at Juventus on current offer, because, he needs to be a stopper, a guy that, very much like his countryman Van Dijk, just puts an end to anything that's going on, defensively. He's the last line and the guy that you're most dependent on to, break up play. But at Juventus, because Chiellini still holds that role and you have Bonucci and whatnot, he's being asked to be more of the progressor, the guy that can actually get forward. And I don't think that he's shown the ability to be good in possession, hasn't really been very effective in high line situations where, attackers can run in behind. Does he have the foot speed to catch up? Does he have the awareness and the ability to snuff out, danger before it's at his doorstep? And in all of these things where, you question, obviously foot speed is one thing, and that's not up to him. He wasn't blessed with great foot speed, but what you do want when you don't have that foot speed is the awareness and the ability to snuff it out before it becomes a problem. And I feel like that's where De Ligt is not necessarily holding up as well. Again, we can go back to the things that I've been talking about before, the possession stats, the ability to advance the ball, the ability to have the confidence and composure to get forward and, move the ball into the final third. I don't really think that he's well adept at that. So you would basically need him to be the heir apparent to Thiago Silva right now, a guy that can play in the center of the defense, marshal it, be the, the difference maker, the stopper, but also while in possession, be the guy that can, be very comfortable in possession and pick passes and in some ways initiate our offense. And for what I've seen so far from De Ligt, obviously he's still very young, 21, 22 years old. He hasn't really shown me that he can do these things extremely well. As far as being like a low block defender, or a team that is very much in possession of the football, he seems to excel in being the guy that is a stopper, the guy that is the final line of defense, making the last ditch tackle or just breaking up any sort of counter-attacking situation. But in terms of being the guy that has to be on the front foot and the forward-thinking defender, I feel like he has a lot to learn there in that role. And on current offer, I don't think that Chelsea would want to take on his wages, take on his the transfer fee, knowing that he can't necessarily play. He's not a like-for-like substitution for the likes of Rudiger or Azpilicueta if he leaves, or Thiago Silva at his advanced stage. So for me at this point in time, when you examine the hard data on De Ligt, I think that it might be a situation where we might want to pass, just because the skill set, what he has on offer right now is not necessarily what we want in our center backs. Now, when it comes to K2, Kalidou Koulibaly, I have a lot of time for this guy. I watched him since he was at Napoli. And under Maurizio Sarri, he was fantastic, and there was a reason why he was the most sought-after center back of that era. A guy that clearly had a lot to offer in possession, as a stopper, long-range passer, just everything. He had the complete passage. He had the catch-up speed. He had the make-up speed to sort out any sort of like counterattack resistant, as I said before. A guy that you could rely on to be a stopper as well. So he was just a complete package, a guy that I considered a boss defender. Granted, he has been a little bit more injured the last little while, and when I started doing the deep search into his stats and whatnot, I was a little bit surprised to know that he wasn't the most forward-thinking defender at the Napoli setup. Obviously, Napoli is still a possession-based team. That hasn't changed too much. They possess the ball maybe about 60%, 58, 59% per game. And, they very much want to be on the front foot. And while they do build attacks from the back, it's not Koulibaly who's the guy that's progressing the ball for them. It's actually Rui, his partner, who's actually in possession of the football more often than not and advancing the ball. And it's for that reason that makes me think that maybe Koulibaly might not be the ideal fit. He's not used in that similar role as we've used, Rudiger in the past. And it seems like Rui, who's also the exact same age, is probably the more relied upon defender in possession and whatnot, and advancing the ball forward into the attacking third and whatnot. So, obviously we have seen Koulibaly play that role before. A couple of years ago under Maurizio Sarri, he was exceptional. But, in recent times and under new management, he's not been used in that role very often. He's been used mostly as the stopper, the guy that sits back and sort of like breaks up play for them. And with that in mind, he's also been a little bit more banged up, a little bit more injury pulled than Rui. So is this the right buy for Chelsea when you consider the possession stats, the fact that we need somebody that is very comfortable and composed in possession and be able to advance the ball? I'm still sitting on the fence on this one. I love him to death. I think that in his prime, he was ideal for this particular setup, but I'm just wondering if in his advanced age, and not that 30 is for a defender, but in this stage in his career, has he shown that he can continue to play at that level? Can he play, can he get up and down the pitch similar to what we saw Rudiger do? Or is he more of the sitter, the guy that sits back, and Thiago Silva kind of like dictates play from deeper? And has he shown the ability to dictate play from deeper in his new role with Napoli? I'm not quite sure there. I'm not certain that is an ideal fit. But again, if the price tag's right, I'm willing to take a flyer on this guy for whatever reason. But again, if we're looking at just the hard data, the stats that I'm looking at right now, the possession stats, the carrying stats, the ability to, be that dictator in the back, can he do that? The stats are saying no, but again, I'm very nostalgic when it comes to K2. So we'll have to wait and see. I'm not sure if we've been there has been a hard link, a solid link to Kalidou Koulibaly, other than like just fans like myself saying we need to get this guy. Because the other side of the things that, we haven't really looked at and is very much vital is the fact that Chelsea aren't really the biggest side in terms of, winning aerial duels and being like a commanding presence. We lack height and strength in the midfield, and of course in the attacking third as well. So we are going to need defenders, especially if we sign somebody like Kounde, who's not necessarily, the most aggressive, combative guy. Now, the last name I'm going to be looking at is a name from the Bundesliga, this guy by the name of Josko Gvardiol, who plays for RB Leipzig, and he's been, at the tip of everyone's tongue when it comes to the next defender, your next ball-playing defender that is, of the quality that we need at Chelsea. I've heard his name bandied about so much. Haven't really seen him play enough. I have seen him. I've been watching a bit of RB Leipzig because I have an interest in Cuckoo, who I think can come in and help Chelsea. But I haven't really focused a lot of my attention on watching Gvardiol play. He has stuck out in a few games. His dribbling ability is obviously very good, and his ball progression. But the things that I'm looking at with him that, when you're looking at the deeper underlying stats that, raise alarm bells is, number one, first of all, when we look at possession and pressing and, being put under pressure in the Bundesliga, I would say that the Bundesliga probably ranks as one of the lower leagues in terms of being pressed. They don't really have a lot of teams that press the ball relentlessly. They basically allow teams to play out and play comfortably for the most part. Obviously, you do have the Bayerns and whatnot who will press you right from the moment of the ball coming out. But overall, I would say that the Bundesliga is probably the least press-heavy league of the top four. for sure. And with that in mind, you look at the stats, the possession stats of somebody like Gvardiol, and you're like, well, yes, he's definitely okay in possession. He advances the ball, and he's very good at dribbling and whatnot, but he's not really being pressured a lot. He's not really receiving the ball under a lot of pressure as some of the defenders that I mentioned before. And with that in mind, can you trust him to come to a faster league like the Premier League, a league that is much more physically demanding and where pressure is coming at you from all sorts of angles? Can you trust him to make the right decisions in those scenarios? And on current the stats that I've seen right now, like his passing stats and his possession stats, I would say that this guy's a few years away from being a real impactful player. Of course, with Chelsea, you kind of want to get them before they become that impactful players so that you're not paying well over the odds for them. But with Gvardiol in particular, the things that we're going to be needing from our center backs next year in terms of like possession, in terms of passing ability, I still think he needs some things to work out there. His passing ability, long range passing ability is not very good at all. There would be a significant drop off there. And I don't really think that we utilize defenders as dribblers out of the back. We need guys that are composed on the ball and know where the next pass is going and can make it quickly and accurately. And, based on the stats and whatnot, again, this is not necessarily on the eye test, guys. I have not watched enough of him to formulate an opinion based on, what we actually see in the games from him. But based on the stats, he does not look like the type of player that is going to be comfortable when pressured with the ball, because his passing stats aren't necessarily stellar when you're in a league that doesn't press that much. And you assume that when you go into a league where there's going to be high press almost every other game, you will make more mistakes. And if your passing isn't like pinpoint when you're not under pressure, then the chances are when you are put under pressure, you're going to have a lot of problems there. Young guy, lots to learn, and I think that there's definitely a guy that you should keep your eye on, because he's definitely the guy that, in terms of ball possession and progressing the ball into the final third, he's one of the best that I've seen, that I've analyzed in terms of doing that. He's a very good dribbler. He's very much like Kounde in terms of being composed on the ball and relaxed and whatnot. But in terms of what we need next year and pushing forward, I'm not quite sure if Gvardiol is quite there or quite ready yet to be that left-sided defender that can, basically control that flank, be a defensive stopper for us, and then also advance that ball. In terms of his defensive actions, as a 19-year-old, it shows that he's exceptional, especially with tackling and, of course, interceptions, which is what we use, in the press and whatnot. You want somebody that is reading the play well and anticipating where the next pass is going to go, and, obviously winning it as well. So he ranks in the top 10 there in tackles and interceptions, and, at 19, that is exceptional. So there is qualities that he does possess at this age right now that we can use in the side, and we could actually even flourish with. But again, with me, the way I look at the way Chelsea want to play football, and the fact that we always want to be on the front foot, the fact that we always want to be in possession, I really do think that passing range and ability to pick passes is something that we're going to be relying on a lot going forward, especially with the loss of Rudiger, who is obviously one of our better passers out from the back. And with Thiago Silva getting a little bit older, we're going to need somebody that can at least match their numbers, or at least be comparable in that respect. And I mean, you guys let me know in the comments as well. I mean, maybe I'm missing something here, because all I'm hearing is those Gvardiol. Gvardiol is an ideal fit for Chelsea. And, I watch his videos and I see him dribbling and I see him making all these incredible tackles and whatnot. But is he the right fit for Chelsea? Versus based on basically what player style we need right now. A guy that can, dictate the tempo from the back, a guy that can be a release for the press, a guy that can be comfortable in possession, move the ball quickly and make quick decisions under pressure. Is he that guy? Leave comments in the comment section, folks. I really do want to hear your opinions on that. Of all the guys, really, whether it be Koulibaly, whether it be Jules, Kounde, whether it be, Skriniar, any of those guys. If you guys have any comments, please leave them, and hopefully we can address them later. But I do think I'm going to wrap it up there. Fellas, of the defenders that we've been looking at, which ones are the ones that you want to see Chelsea go after? We have Gvardiol, we have obviously Skriniar, we have Koulibaly, we have Ligt, we have Kounde. Of those 5 names, who do you think Chelsea should be going after? I mean, I know I have my picks. I would love to see Koulibaly. I know that I'm kind of contradicting what I'm saying, just based on the fact that I just always love this guy, and I think that he's a real boss back there. I think that he'd help us in ways that we cannot measure right now. But so I really do like him, even though the hard data is not really playing out in his favor. I also like Jules Kounde. I think that Jules Kounde is ideal for this setup right now. I think that he's the kind of guy that Thomas Tuchel wants in his back 3. A guy that is very comfortable in possession, moves the ball forward, picks passes, can put in crosses, can play. Obviously, is also very versatile. Can play in the midfield, can play in the wingback positions as well. So he to me is a lock, a guy that we have to have. And Skriniar, if the rumors are true and Lukaku wants to go back to Inter and we can somehow, do a player swap with some cash involved, I mean, Skriniar would be an ideal selection for Chelsea. Very, very much, a guy that is combative, a guy that can, marshal a defense, a guy that is very good in possession. His passing stats are off the charts, and a guy that obviously is very composed, gets a lot of possession as well. So these are the types of guys that I want to see at Chelsea, going forward. But what do you guys think? Obviously, Gvardiol I haven't seen much of. Very young kid. Let me know what you guys think about him. Let me know what you think that he can offer Chelsea that we don't currently have, and whether or not his skill set matches that of what we need at this club in terms of how we play under Thomas Tuchel. But until then, fellas, tomorrow look out for the next one. I'm going to be doing the midfield tomorrow. We're going to be looking at a few of the midfielders that we've been linked in, the Declan Rices. Obviously we lost out in Nouman, but I'll be looking at some of the other names that I think might be able to help our midfield out and take us forward. But until then, you know what to do. Keep the blue flag flying high, and nothing else. Peace.